are you doing listening in on a private conversation between me and my mother? I've a good mind to have my father call a policeman.
Olive, will you show Mr.
Oh, Popeye.
Mr. I the spare room?
Just Popeye.
Go upstairs,
Just
Mr.
Popeye.
I. Olive will show you the room.
Thanks. Oh, it comes from some asylum here. Oh, show me a room. Show me some courtesy. It might be nice.
I don't see why I have to do anything on the day before my engagement party when nothing's ready. Especially me. And what kind of name is that anyway? Popeye. Pretty strange.
What kind of name is olive oil? Sounds like some kind of lubricants.
You're near in town, right?
Yeah. You got a room for ink?
Bluto, Bluto, Bluto. Everyone takes advantage of my poor Bluto.
She loves me.
I'm looking for me papa. Yeah. I must trust only, baby. You're a baby. It says here, right there, right.
Did you order a hamburger? I'm fast, I'm foxy. You could have a heart attack.
Spinach!
I want spinach. I'll ask you for spinach.
Where did you get that pronunciation?
That's why I always have to break off our engagement. To stop you all from taking advantage of the sweetest, most humble man on the face of this earth. You scared the wits out of me.
Hey, rat! Got an olive cut in your throat? I'm mine, he's paid. You won't bust him, he kill you! Spinach! Olive oil, sweet. What are you doing, making a salad? Pui! And double pui! Oh, yeah, good, you made it.
This is a smorgasbord of violence.
You owe me an apology.
Olive!
Help! Popeye!
Even though you're larger than me, you can't win. Cause you're bad. And the good always wins over the bad.
Oh, yeah!
Okay, whether the character of Popeye should or should not be considered a superhero, I'm taking a look at this film anyway. Through the course of history, there had always been heroes that would enrapture audiences with their adventures. Dating way back to the ancient Greeks, stories and performers would retell some of the great tales of the gods for spectators. You could probably trace stories of heroes back to cave paintings. Over time, heroes would take on new shapes. Different periods in history would create their own heroes whose adventures would still basically do the same thing: dazzle audiences. Popeye made his debut in the comic strip Thimble Theater in 1929. Created by L.C. Segar, or E.C. Segar, Thimble Theater had already been around for 10 years by the time Popeye showed up. The strip had already introduced audiences to the characters of Olive Oil, her brother Castor, their parents Cole and Nana, along with Olive's boyfriend, Harold Ham Gravy. Ironically, the first words the world ever got to see Popeye utter was his mistaking himself as another kind of popular hero. Popeye was initially just going to be a guest star in the strip, but he became so popular a character that readers demanded to see him return. His unplanned popularity soon changed the focus of the strip completely, and Popeye took center stage, making him the star. With his giant forearms and unique speech pattern, Popeye was adapted into a series of popular cartoons by Fleischer Studios, starting in 1933, which are great. The stories were much simpler than what Segar was doing in Thimble Theater, but they would cement Popeye's iconic status with audiences and give him his signature theme song.
I'm Popeye the Sailor Man.
The Fleischer cartoons also popularized his strength from spinach, a trait the strip hadn't focused on that much. In the cartoons, it would be typically used for the finale of the story. Popeye would soon become one of the most popular cartoon characters of the period, surpassing even Mickey Mouse for a while. He would also be attributed to the increase of spinach sales during the 1930s. I guess people in those days really thought spinach would do for them what it did for Popeye, and it would help them win fights all over town. Popeye continued to appear in newspapers, comic books, cartoons, and television since his creation. but it had always been presented in an animated format. That is, until 1980. Popeye would be a joint production between Paramount and Disney. It having a big budget and a lot of talent involved would raise the film's expectations for it to be a big commercial hit. They had legendary producer Robert Evans, cartoonist and writer Jules Pfeiffer writing the screenplay, and songs written by Harry Nilsson. The directing duties ultimately went to Robert Altman. I still can't believe Altman directed this. Making a big crowd-pleasing film with a popular cartoon character, it isn't the kind of film Altman specialized in, or ever did. So the choice of him to bring Segar's characters to life, already this feels weird. The film would be based more on Segar's 1930s era Thimble Theater comic strip than the more popular cartoons audiences were more familiar with. The casting in the film, I think, is pretty perfect across the board. It's not the easiest thing to cast actors as beloved cartoon characters that everyone knows and who will be able to sell themselves in the roles. But I think pretty much everyone does. There were several actors considered to play Popeye and Olive, but Popeye eventually ended up being played by Robin Williams.
No.
Williams was already a popular television star thanks to his role on Mork and Mindy. Starring in Popeye would mark his first lead role in a film. He did have a small part in the 1977 film Can I Do It Till I Need Glasses, but he played himself and barely anyone remembers it. Olive Oyl would be played by Shelley Duvall, an actress Altman had worked with in several of his previous films. The rest of the cast would consist of character actors, along with an eclectic mix of acrobats and circus performers to make up the citizens of Sweet Haven. Popeye would be filmed on the coast of Malta, where the entire town of Sweet Haven was built, and still stands today. Supposedly it's a big tourist attraction there. If I said I was making a Popeye film, I would never have thought of including prostitutes, swearing, taxes, and a song titled He's Large in the middle of it. None of it would have occurred to me.
Don't touch nothing there. You might get a venerable disease.
Is that a manhole you got in your pocket?
Honestly, I always thought Popeye and all of Segar's characters were a bit odd. They all looked pretty strange. I mean, look, Popeye's head is shaped like a butt. The fact that Popeye even became such a popular character is something that seems like an odd twist of fate. Who could have predicted this goofy sailor would have become so beloved? So the film having this bizarre tone does feel right to me.
Pass is another word that wimpy. He don't pass. He should be killed to death.
And things could have gotten even weirder if they managed to include the Jeep in all this, which supposedly was the original idea. But the Jeep got dropped, and all his psychic powers he possessed, and that whole subplot, was given to Sweet Pea.
Oh. You mean now I can carry him just because I was worried about you?
Yes.
I think the strongest thing the film has going for it is the cast. Duvall is very prissy and klutzy and swoons at the drop of a hat. Paul Dooley's Wimpy acts like a real moocher, ready to jump in wherever an opportunity can benefit him. He easily screws over the Oyls, and Popeye, he doesn't care.
What is that glop you're eating?
It's a soup burger. These are difficult times. Burgers can't be choosers.
Hoy.
Richard Libertini as Giesel is always deadpan and angry. I always find this guy funny. The whole Oyl family, Castor, Nana, and Cole, they're all pretty funny in their parts. Cole's repeated demands of wanting apologies, I always thought was really goofy and funny. It's probably my favorite catchphrase from the whole flick.
I heard that. Don't think I didn't hear that. He owes me an apology.
True, I hates, but I come by me hating fair.
Ray Walston does a fine job as the cranky poop deck pappy. Paul L. Smith is large and menacing as Bluto, and Altman's grandson is cute and adorable as Sweet Pea. Then Williams. He does a great Popeye. He's got the look down with his one eye and the pipe sticking out of his mouth. He's even able to sell the bulbous forearms that actually look pretty good. He does some pretty good physical stunts with some pratfalls and somersaults. I think it's his most physical performance ever. But he's also got the attitude, the voice, and that Popeye mumbling. Finally, years later, watching the film on DVD with subtitles on, I was able to discover just what some of Williams' lines were. Apparently, after the film was shot, they discovered most of what Williams was mumbling couldn't be understood, and he had to go back to reloop it all. But I still couldn't understand it.
Ugly, huh? You owe me an apology.
What?
Oh, I wonder who shoved a feather in his ear.
What'd you say?
Watching him in the film, I can't imagine any other actor during that period being able to be as good a live-action Popeye as he is. Every time I watch Popeye, I freely accept this surreal world the film presents, and all these characters living there. The Sweet Haven town, the sets, all the characters, it really sells the idea that all of this is taking place in Segar's world. It all feels pretty real in its own universe. There are cartoon sound effects and silliness, but even the outfits the actors wear, they simply look more like clothes than costumes on the characters. They're all a little tattered and raggedy. The town of Sweet Haven is this off-kilter village that has got that worn-down and lived-in look. All the buildings are leaning at odd angles, lining the zigzagging streets. The production design on everything in the film is really good. In a way, Popeye could be argued to be the most faithful comic strip adaptation ever. Most of the time when I see cartoons adapted to live action, everything is so boring. Bright, clean, friendly-looking movies. They really don't have much personality. Here, they weren't afraid to make Sweet Haven a pretty slummy-looking place. It's not exactly the wonderful land of Oz. Like it or not, it fits for Popeye. He was created during the height of the Depression, and him living in a rundown, ramshackle apartment was something that just fit the character. He was a regular working-class sailor. I sure wouldn't want to live there, but maybe I'd pay it a visit.
You're near in town, right?
Call this a town? Yeah.
The film is strangely bizarre. For one thing, the story. There's really no clear story being told. Right when Popeye arrives in town, his mission is in search of his pappy. I suppose that's the main one it's supposed to be. But from there, until he finds him, he gets drawn into one distracting scene after another. The whole film starts to have these carnival surroundings sweep Popeye up into them. He gets into a fight at the Rough House Diner, beating up the Palookas, led by Dennis Farina. He's shunned out of Olive's engagement party. He finds Sweet Pea. The taxman taxes the oils. Popeye defeats Oxblood Oxheart. He discovers Sweet Pea is psychic. Wimpy takes Sweet Pea to a racetrack. Popeye gets him back. Then Bluto kidnaps Sweet Pea. And finally, Popeye finds Pappy. Instead of being short stops Popeye takes as he makes his way through the big story, these scenes are the story. It's like most of the movie is a setup to a story that never happens. Popeye starts to become a supporting character in his own film. The center of the movie becomes more about the town and citizens of Sweet Haven than Popeye. There's really no one major thread of an idea running through the film to follow, and it mainly consists of haphazard scenes. In a 7-minute cartoon this might work, but in a 2-hour film, a little more focus would have helped. I realize this is based off a comic strip, and you can't expect Popeye to be in search of the meaning of life, or something really heavy. But still, how about something? The budding romance between him and Olive doesn't even get that much attention. There's really no great scenes together with those two. It's like the love story is secondary. And I would have thought it would be much more prominent a feature in the film. But the few scenes that they do have together, they just feel slid in between all the wacky goings-on in Sweet Haven.
Follow me. Get out.
He's
here.
got him.
Get down.
Will's got all of them. And Sweet Pea.
Listen to me.
Popeye!
90 minutes in, and finally things pick up, with the appearance of Pappy. A race begins of getting to this buried treasure, and Popeye trying to save Olive and Sweet Pea. If the whole buried treasure thing didn't finally come up, it started to look like Popeye would be hanging out in the Sweet Haven barbershop for the rest of the film or something. The comedy is mainly physical humor, sight gags and pratfalls. Overall, the film really isn't that funny. The characters really don't have any funny interactions between each other. It's pretty weird. It's fun to see a real-life version of Popeye and Olive talking to each other, but they don't really say anything comical to each other.
Thanks for your help.
Let it fly in the breeze and get caught in the trees. Give a home to the fleas in my hair.
I've never been a big fan of musicals. During the 70s and 80s, the musical as a genre was pretty much dead. There really weren't that many around at the time, and it would take 2 more decades until the musical finally reappeared with some success. The early Popeye Flesher cartoons were very musical-oriented, so making Popeye a musical isn't that outlandish an idea. Obviously, one of the selling points for a musical is the music. The handful of musicals I do enjoy, it's the specific songs, choreography, and dance sequences that are in the film that make me want to go back and rewatch them. With Popeye, for one thing, the songs are hit and miss. Some are pretty catchy, while others are just bizarre and they don't sound like much effort was put into writing them. Compared to some of the short catchy tunes back in the Flesher cartoons, some of these are pretty embarrassing. It's like they just repeat the chorus 13 times.
He's large.
And I am what I am, what I am, and I am what I am, and that's all that I am, 'cause I am what I am.
Large.
Mean. You know what I mean? I'm meaner than. I mean what I say.
Large.
It is cool. Everything is cool.
He needs me, 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 he needs me.
I know kids are meant to enjoy the film, but the songs could be a little bit wittier and sophisticated. Sweet Pea's lullaby is pretty good. As for choreography that accompanies the songs and the scenes, where is that?
Oh.
There aren't any dance sequences to accompany the songs. The songs are sung, and there's nothing really exciting about the action we're watching while they're being sung. No big dance number by the townsfolk when Popeye arrives in Sweet Haven, or when he's in the diner and they're singing about food. At the racetrack, Popeye is just walking around singing, with a bunch of hookers behind him. Most of the time, people are sitting and singing or walking and singing. Olive Oil's scene singing about Bluto, how he's large, it really goes all out, making her sing and pack her suitcase. They were getting a little bit more complicated here.
But he's large.
In comparison, look at another musical comedy, one of my favorite films that came out in the same year as Popeye, The Blues Brothers. The dance numbers are awesome. Even the ones staged in average settings around town, the music and choreography make them really entertaining to watch. Much more exciting than this.
Everything is cool.
I know dancing might not have been all the actors' strong suits, especially trying to dance in those big-ass shoes. I don't think any of the major stars are exactly triple threats here. But at least use the background performers a bit more. Or forget all the circus people and hire some dancers and choreographers who can do more than just fall down. The film really could have used some exciting Big Busby Berkeley musical sequences. they never happen.
If anyone passes to whisk, it's Bachman, it's Wham, understand.
So keep good behavior, that's your one lifesaver with Popeye the Sailor Man.
He's Popeye the Sailor Man. He's Popeye the Sailor Man. He's brought to the beach, 'cause he's his pet. He's Popeye the Sailor Man. Popeye the Sailor Man.
The film doesn't try to get fancy and complicate things, and the characters just sing the songs, and that's about it. The musical numbers are awkwardly staged and not really that lively, and the film relies on the song to sell the scene. And like I said, those are hit and miss with me. The musical sequences here certainly didn't revitalize the idea of bringing back musicals anytime soon. Even at the end of the film, when we finally get to hear Popeye's theme song, sung by Williams, the number is pretty stagnant. Really, for a musical comedy, the film is pretty flat with both of them.
Oh, Popeye.
He's Popeye the Sailor.
Oh, my hero.
He's Popeye the Sailor.
By the way, I was always disappointed with the ending of Popeye. All through the film, Bluto is this big mean guy. He trashes the oil's house. He beats up Popeye. He kidnaps Sweet Pea, ties up Pappy, and then kidnaps Olive Oil. I really wanted to see Popeye give this guy his comeuppance. And in the end, Popeye just punches him once, and Bluto is off and swimming into the ocean with his yellow clothes on after he sees Popeye beat up the octopus. There should have been a better payoff between these two. Supposedly a more epic finale was planned, with Popeye and Bluto fighting on a sinking boat, hitting each other with planks, and just being a much more exciting battle between the two. But by the time they got around to filming it, money started getting tight, and they just went with the octopus thing. I have to say, with all the flaws I have with this film, that I still think it's oddly compelling. It's sort of like a weird dream you're experiencing and want to see what's coming up next. Some charm still manages to come through all the major missteps. I remember seeing this when I was like 5, and even then thinking, this is a really nutty movie. Some of the scenes I get a kick out of, like Popeye's fight at the Rough House Cafe and Bluto making him into a thumbtack, even though all those scenes just end. And I like seeing all these characters, even though they could have done much more with them. Way too much time wasted on the taxman. The film does have a unique personality, and it embraces the strange world and characters. I find that more interesting than the usual flat and boring and safe cartoon adaptations that just try to please everyone. Supposedly, there's a 3-hour cut of the film that has never been released, and I would certainly be curious to see it. This is probably not ultimately what they thought they would end up with when the idea of a Popeye film came up. But if Paramount and Disney were shooting for a more mainstream, conventional film, then they shouldn't have hired Altman to direct it.
There's a logical explanation for this. I'd make the same mistake myself.
If you believe the stories, some of the cast and crew weren't just consuming spinach and hamburgers during the filming. Apparently it was a really chaotic shoot, and Altman would later say what made it to the screen was a pale comparison of what initially was planned. Since its release, Popeye has been looked at as a box office bomb. Just a huge, expensive misfire by the studios, and it's now remembered as a cinematic turkey. The film did have a pretty hefty budget, but regardless of how the majority of people view it today, the film did make money and turned a profit.
Yeah, what is this?
It's 120 simoleons.
You went 120 simoleons?
You know how many hamburgers that is?
It might not have been the huge blockbuster everyone expected it to be, though. The fact that it was a very heavily publicized film and a major holiday release by 2 studios that ultimately became such an extremely odd film about a popular character and a musical to boot. All those components might have helped prolong the perception that the film was a financial disaster and one of the biggest bombs in cinema history. Ironically, Popeye ended up being one of Altman's biggest commercial hits out of his career. I rarely hear anyone talk about the Popeye production. It's almost like it's become this unspoken experience that all the principals want to put behind them. I would have loved to have heard a DVD commentary by Altman about this flick. It's just such a striking contrast to the rest of the films in his career. He must have had some pretty good stories about it. From here on out, Altman would go back to the smaller, offbeat films he specialized in. Surprisingly, he was never asked to direct the Flintstones movie. Williams appears not to be a fan of the film either. He has described his initial struggling years in film as the Popeye years. Even returning to Mork and Mindy the following season, the notoriety of Popeye had already reached the masses, and the label of bomb had already taken hold.
Are you saying that a grown man like yourself watches cartoons every morning?
Yes, I've seen Popeye 14 times. And if you run it backwards, it has an ending. But you know...
The experience of Popeye helped Robin Williams' decision of never wanting to direct a film. As he explained, it would be very difficult for me to say to someone, "I'm sorry, that wasn't very good," and then have them go, "Well, what about Popeye?" I don't fault him in any way with this film. In fact, I think he's pretty good in it, and I think all the actors come through it pretty well. Even if it was the complete stinker most have branded the film to be, you can't blame him for signing on. The lead role in a big-budget film as an iconic character, directed by Robert Altman for his first major film performance. It sounds like a sweet deal. I'm more embarrassed for some of the films he's been a part of when he was already an established film star years later, and could have walked away from it. He's done some pretty bad stuff, much worse than Popeye. I always hate when some of his films try to crowbar an unnecessary Robin Williams shtick scene somewhere in there. When he does his comedy, and they let him go off on one of his comic tangents for a few minutes. "Oh, where am I? Oh, I don't know. Alien planet. Take me to your leader. Oh, the quest for Viagra. 10. Oh, don't be afraid. What exactly is Botox? Eliminates wrinkles and expressions. Don't be afraid. Now cocaine. There's a real drug. Save me, Jesus. I see the light. Don't be afraid. Even if it's completely out of place for the film and his character, I hate when they do that. Even if Popeye never seems to build momentum, there is a surreal, goofy charm to all this, and I do get a kick out of seeing the actors in the roles. I'm not sure if a kid who wasn't familiar with Popeye at all before watching this would be a fan of his when the credits started rolling at the end. They might want something a little less nuts. There's been talk of a new animated Popeye film soon. In 3D, of course. What else is new? Everything's in 3D now. This video's in 3D. So I'm predicting that if that ever gets released, some new attention will be cast on Altman's version, and people will seek this one out. Anyway, I guess if I was in Malta, I would check out Popeye's Village for the heck of it. Maybe buy a Popeye magnet and pick up some food.
Oh yeah, I don't know when I've had this much fun and still been conscious.